A retired couple sold everything, moved to Southeast Asia, convinced they'd cracked the code. Social Security would cover it. They'd seen the videos: cheap apartments, street food for $2, rooftop pools, the dream. Within 14 months, they were back in Ohio. Not because they wanted to leave, because the reality was nothing like what they'd watched online. Healthcare wasn't covered. The visa situation got complicated fast. Prices had climbed way beyond what the old blog posts promised. And when a family emergency hit back home, they had absolutely no backup plan. Nothing. And here's the part that should really stop you. They are not the exception. They are the rule. Retiring abroad can absolutely work. Thousands of Americans are living it successfully right now. Better weather, lower costs, real quality of life on the same fixed income. But most retirement videos only show you the beaches and the cheap apartments. They never show you what happens 6 months in, after the honeymoon phase ends. Here are 10 things nobody tells you before you go. Number 1, the cheap country illusion. Let me paint you a picture. Someone spends 6 months researching. They watch dozens of YouTube videos. They read blog posts about living in Thailand or Portugal or Mexico on $1,500 a month. They run the numbers. They get excited. They start telling their friends and family. They make the move. And then, the first month's rent comes in 30% higher than what the blog said. Then, the grocery store near their apartment, the one that actually has familiar food, is twice what they expected. Then, the restaurant that everyone in the Expat Facebook group raves about costs almost as much as a restaurant back home. And they sit there, staring at their bank account, thinking, what happened? Here's what happened. The content they were using to make one of the biggest financial decisions of their life was 2, 3, sometimes 4 years old. And the world changed dramatically after 2022. In parts of Portugal, Lisbon especially, but also cities like Porto, rents have surged in ways that shocked even longtime residents. The same thing happened in Mexico City's Roma and Condesa neighborhoods, in certain parts of Chiang Mai and Phuket, in Panama City. The places that went viral as affordable expat destinations became less affordable. Because when enough people move somewhere because it's cheap, it stops being cheap. That's just economics. One retiree I came across described it this way. She'd budgeted $1,500 a month based on research she'd done in late 2022. By the time she actually landed in her chosen city in 2024, the real number was closer to $2,300. Not because she was living lavishly, because prices had moved, and her research hadn't. The dangerous part? A lot of the content that still shows up first in searches is old. People don't update their blog posts. YouTube videos don't expire. You search cost of living in city, and the top result might be from 2021, and you trust it because it's got 500,000 views. The fix here is straightforward, but requires discipline. Use current data, not content from 2 years ago. Current. Check expat forums where people are posting their actual monthly breakdowns right now. Look at current rental listings on local property sites, not expat blogs. And no matter what the research says, always build a financial buffer of at least 15 to 20% above your projected budget. Because costs in foreign countries don't freeze just because you moved there. They keep moving. And they almost always move in one direction. The cheap country is real. It's just a moving target, not a fixed address. Number 2, Medicare usually doesn't protect you overseas. Now, here's where a lot of people's retirement plans have a genuinely dangerous gap, and they don't find out about it until they're in a hospital bed in a foreign country, wondering what this is going to cost them. Let's be direct about this. Original Medicare provides little to no coverage outside of the United States. There are narrow exceptions, certain emergency situations near the Canadian or Mexican border, for example. But for the vast majority of expat retirees, If something goes wrong medically overseas, Medicare is not going to save them. Think about what that actually means for a minute. You've spent decades paying into the system. You've planned your retirement finances around the assumption that healthcare is covered. And then you retire abroad and discover that one of your most fundamental financial protections simply doesn't apply where you live. A lot of people don't believe this at first. They think there must be a way around it, some form or supplement or workaround. There isn't. Not really. Medigap supplemental plans, the ones that cover Medicare's gaps domestically, almost universally don't cover foreign medical care either. And the kicker is that even in countries with excellent, affordable healthcare, Thailand, Mexico, Portugal, Colombia, one serious medical event can still wipe out months of retirement savings. A major surgery, an extended hospital stay, a cardiac event, a bad fall. These aren't hypotheticals, they happen. And when they happen without proper coverage, the bills are real. I heard about a man, retired, mid-60s, living in Central America, who had a stroke. He survived, thankfully, but the medical costs and the emergency transport back to the United States cost nearly $80,000 out of pocket. He had no international health insurance. He hadn't thought he'd need it. He spent 3 years rebuilding from that one event. Here's the mindset shift that actually works. Successful retirees abroad treat international health insurance as their first expense, not their last. Not something they figure out after they settle in. Not something they'll look into once they land. It's line one on the budget, before the apartment, before the flights, before anything else. Good international health insurance for a healthy retiree in their mid to late 60s might run anywhere from $200 to $600 a month, depending on coverage level, destination, and age. That's real money, but compare it to an uncovered emergency, and it's not even close. Get coverage before you go, not after. Number 3, the visa problem is bigger than most people expect. This one trips people up in a way that's almost uniquely frustrating, because it often starts feeling manageable and then quietly becomes a serious problem before they even realize it. Here's how it usually goes. Someone plans to retire abroad. They look up the visa situation for their target country, and what they read is not that bad. Tourist visas are easy. Extensions seem doable. There are blogs and YouTube videos about people doing visa runs, quick trips to a neighboring country and back to reset the clock. It all sounds like a bureaucratic inconvenience at worst, not a real obstacle. So they arrive on a tourist visa. They plan to figure out the residency thing later. And for a while, it works. Until it doesn't. Because immigration rules change. A country that was relaxed about long-stay tourists in 2022 might have cracked down significantly by 2025. Income requirements for formal residency get adjusted. Processing times get longer. Officials start asking harder questions. That visa run trick that everyone swore worked, a lot of countries are now flagging it and turning people away at the border. And here's the uncomfortable reality. If you can't legally stay long-term, you can't really retire somewhere. You're just visiting indefinitely and hoping no one notices. That's not a retirement plan. That's a gamble. The countries that consistently attract successful retirees tend to share one characteristic. Their residency pathways are clear, achievable, and relatively stable. Georgia, the country, not the state, has become remarkably popular with expats, partly because its residency and tax structure are accessible. Paraguay's pensioner residency program has straightforward income requirements. Ecuador's pensioner visa remains accessible. These aren't the most glamorous destinations maybe, but stability matters more than scenery when you're planning the next 20 years of your life. The fix is simple, but requires doing the hard research before you fall in love with a destination. Don't research the beaches first. Research the visa first. Look at current immigration requirements. Current, not 2 years ago, for long-term residency. Talk to immigration attorneys in that country if you can. Join expat forums where people are dealing with it right now. and pick destinations where you can legally and comfortably live, not just visit. Because there is nothing more disorienting than building a life somewhere and then being asked to leave. Number 4, banking problems can hit fast. This one sounds almost too mundane to be a serious retirement problem. Banking? Really? But ask anyone who's experienced it and they'll tell you, the day your card stops working in a foreign country is genuinely one of the most stressful experiences imaginable. Especially if you're living on a fixed income and that card is connected to your Social Security deposits. Here's a scenario that plays out more often than you'd think. A retiree is living abroad. They've been there 6 months. Everything is going fine. Then one day they go to the ATM and their card is declined. They try again. Same result. They check their balance online. The money is there. They call the bank. Turns out, after multiple international transactions, the bank's fraud detection flagged the account and froze it. A phone call will fix it, but the phone call requires being on hold for 40 minutes and navigating a US customer service line from a different time zone. And in the meantime, they have no access to their money. Now imagine that happening during a medical emergency, or the day your rent is due, or when you need to buy an urgent flight home. Beyond the fraud flag issue, there's the slow bleed of fees. Currency conversion fees, international transaction fees, ATM withdrawal fees. A retiree pulling cash 2 or 3 times a week might be losing $30 to $60 a month just to access their own money. That sounds small until you annualize it and realize it's $600 to $700 a year, money that could pay for a full month of food. The successful expats treat banking the way a good electrician treats wiring. Redundant systems everywhere. They keep a primary US bank account for receiving Social Security and other income. They have at least one secondary debit card, ideally from a bank known for waiving international fees, like Charles Schwab's checking account, which reimburses ATM fees worldwide. They keep emergency cash in a secure location, and once they're settled in a country long-term, they open a local bank account to handle rent, utilities, and daily expenses in local currency. Multiple options, multiple backups, because your income is fixed and access to it is non-negotiable. Number 5, tourist English is not real-life English. Okay, let's talk about something that sounds like a minor inconvenience, but quietly affects every single aspect of daily life when you're living abroad rather than just visiting. When you travel as a tourist, even an extended tourist, you tend to stay in the tourist ecosystem. The hotels, the restaurants near the main square, the tour operators, the taxi drivers. These businesses exist to serve people who don't speak the local language. They're designed for it. English works there. It works great, actually. And then you move somewhere. Not visit, move. And suddenly you're dealing with a landlord who communicates only in the local language, a doctor who speaks limited English and whose nurse speaks none, a government office where you need to submit paperwork and the person across the counter looks apologetic but clearly cannot help you in English, a contractor who you need to redo your bathroom but whose explanations of what's going on with your pipes are, to you, completely incomprehensible. Real life is not the tourist zone. Real life is all the other stuff. The bureaucracy, the healthcare system, the neighbor disputes, the utility bills, the lease agreements, the police report after a minor accident. These interactions don't happen in tourist English. They happen in whatever language that country actually runs on. Now, learning a language is absolutely possible. A lot of retirees do it and do it well. Total immersion is actually one of the fastest ways to pick up a new language, and there's real joy in that process. But it takes time, often a year or more, to reach genuine functional fluency. And during that time, important conversations are stressful, misunderstandings are frequent, and navigating any kind of emergency becomes genuinely frightening. This is why countries like the Philippines, Belize, Malta, and Barbados attract so many retirees who might otherwise be put off by the idea of language barriers. English is widely and genuinely spoken there, not just in the tourist district, but in hospitals, government offices, courts, and communities. For first-time expats especially, that removes an enormous layer of daily stress. If you're committed to a non-English speaking country, and many of them are incredible, start learning the language before you move, not after. Take classes, use apps, watch shows in that language. Get as far ahead of the curve as possible, because the moment you need it for something important, you'll wish you had. Language isn't just convenience. When something goes wrong, it's everything. Number 6, family emergencies become expensive. Here's the emotional one, the one that nobody wants to put in their spreadsheet because it feels superstitious, like planning for it might make it happen. But it happens. More often than retirees want to admit when they're in the excited planning phase. A parent has a health crisis. A sibling is hospitalized. A grandchild is born prematurely. A spouse who stayed behind has a fall. A funeral comes with 2 days' notice. These events don't schedule themselves around your retirement budget. They arrive without warning, and when they do, the first thing you're doing is searching for flights home. And last-minute international flights are brutal. We're talking $1,500, $2,000, $2,500 or more for a seat with any kind of reasonable timing. Not the $600 you could find 6 weeks out. The emergency price, the I need to be there in 48 hours price. A retired couple I came across described it simply and painfully. In their first 2 years living abroad, they made 4 emergency trips home. Medical issues on both sides of the family. They hadn't budgeted for a single one. Between the flights and the hotel stays and the extended trips, they spent nearly $12,000 that wasn't in the plan. Their entire financial cushion, gone. And beyond the money, there's the emotional weight of it. Being far from aging parents, watching your grandchildren grow up through video calls, missing the birthday parties and the small moments. The distance that felt freeing in the planning phase can feel like grief during the hard times. This isn't a reason not to retire abroad, but it is a reason to plan honestly. Build at least one emergency US trip per year into your budget, not as a nice to have, but as a non-negotiable line item. Consider it as essential as rent. And have honest conversations with your family before you move, about expectations, about communication, about what happens if there's an emergency. Not just, we'll figure it out. Actually figure it out, in advance, so you're not figuring it out at 2 in the morning when someone calls with bad news. Because the geography of retirement abroad is beautiful, until the people you love need you, and then every mile matters. Number 7, some expat hotspots are changing fast. This one requires some honest self-reflection, and it's worth approaching carefully. Here's the dynamic. An American or European expat moves to a city in a developing country because it's affordable, beautiful, and culturally rich. They tell their friends, they post on social media, they make YouTube videos about how incredible it is. Those videos get views, more people come, property prices rise. Local landlords, sensing opportunity, raise rents. The coffee shops and restaurants that catered to budget-conscious locals start transforming into spots that cater to foreign tastes at foreign-friendly prices. And slowly, the city that was affordable for locals becomes less affordable for them, the people who actually live and work there. In Lisbon, this has been a significant and very public conversation. In Mexico City's most popular expat neighborhoods, local residents have pushed back against the rapid price escalation they attribute to the influx of remote workers and retirees. In parts of Southeast Asia, similar tensions are beginning to simmer. This doesn't mean Americans are universally unwelcome. It doesn't mean you'll be treated poorly or resented everywhere you go. The vast majority of people in the world are genuinely warm and hospitable to foreigners. But it does mean that the concept of living like a local, often used to justify retirement abroad as culturally enriching rather than economically extractive, becomes complicated when your presence is part of what's changing the local economy. The retirees who navigate this best tend to approach it with genuine humility. They make real effort to integrate, learning the language, shopping at local markets, participating in community life, building real friendships with local people rather than just circulating in the expat bubble. They're aware of the difference between visiting a place and taking a piece of it. Before choosing a destination, spend time in local forums, not just expat groups. Read what residents are actually saying about foreign migration in their city. Look for places where you can contribute something to the community, where the relationship feels mutual rather than extractive. Because the best retirement abroad isn't about finding where your dollar goes furthest. It's about finding where you can actually build a life. And that's something that has to be earned, not assumed. Number 8. The IRS still follows you abroad. Alright, let's talk about something that surprises a shocking number of people, including, frankly, people who really should have known better before making the move. There's a persistent belief, sometimes half-joking, sometimes completely serious, that once you leave the United States, you've somehow left your US tax obligations behind. That living abroad is a kind of financial freedom that includes freedom from the IRS. It is not. The United States is one of only 2 countries in the world, the other is Eritrea, that taxes its citizens based on citizenship rather than residency. What that means in plain language, it doesn't matter where you live. If you're an American citizen, the IRS still expects a tax return, every year, without exception. For many retirees living primarily on Social Security and modest investment income, the practical tax burden may not be dramatic. There are exclusions and credits available to expats, the foreign earned income exclusion, the foreign tax credit. And some countries have tax treaties with the US that reduce or eliminate double taxation. So it's not necessarily that you'll owe a huge amount. It's that you still have to deal with it, properly, every year. And there's another piece of this that catches people completely off guard. FBAR, the Foreign Bank Account Report. If you have foreign bank accounts, and if you're living abroad, you probably should have one. And if the total value of those accounts exceeds $10,000 at any point during the year, you are legally required to report those accounts to the US Treasury. This is separate from your tax return. It's a different filing with different deadlines. And failing to file it isn't a minor oversight. The penalties can be severe. FATCA, the Foreign Account Tax Compliance Act, adds another layer. Banks in many countries are now required to report American account holders to the IRS. Some foreign banks, fed up with the compliance burden, simply refuse to open accounts for Americans at all. Which circles back to the banking problem from earlier. None of this is unsolvable, but it requires planning, and it requires the right help. A CPA who specializes in expat taxation. And that specialization matters. This is not the domain of a generalist who does domestic returns. Is worth every dollar they charge. The cost of a good expat tax professional is a few hundred to maybe $1,000 a year. The cost of getting it wrong, penalties, back taxes, amended returns, can be tens of thousands. Get ahead of this before you move, not after. The IRS is patient, but they're not forgiving. Number 9. Loneliness hits harder than people expect. Now we get to the one that doesn't show up in any spreadsheet, the one that can't be solved with better planning or smarter banking, the one that a lot of retirees won't talk about publicly because it feels like admitting failure: loneliness. Here's the fantasy that's easy to believe when you're deep in the planning phase. You'll land in this beautiful place, and almost immediately, the expat community will embrace you. There'll be weekly dinners and beach days and running groups and game nights. You'll have more of a social life than you ever did back home. You'll finally have time for connection. And that can be true, for a while. The first few months abroad often feel electric. Everything is new and exciting. The expat community in most popular destinations is genuinely warm and welcoming to newcomers. There are meetups and Facebook groups and expat bars where you'll meet people immediately. But here's what nobody tells you about expat communities. They're transient by nature. The people you meet in month 1 may be gone by month 6. Remote workers moving on. Retirees who decided the destination wasn't for them. Younger travelers cycling through. The constant churn means that building deep, lasting friendships takes significantly more sustained effort than it does back home, where you've had years or decades to build the foundation. And in the absence of that foundation, the people who knew you before, who share your references and your history, who understand your humor without explanation, a kind of quiet emptiness can settle in. Not always, not for everyone, but for enough people that it shows up as one of the most commonly cited reasons that retirees return home before they plan to. Add to that the absence of family, the grandkids who are growing up and you're not there, the friends back home who moved on with their lives, the sense that you're watching the people you love through a screen, time zone differences that mean you wake up to messages that came in while you were asleep and respond to messages that arrive while they're asleep. And the whole relationship starts feeling like a relay race rather than a conversation. The retirees who build genuinely fulfilling social lives abroad tend to do it deliberately. They prioritize destinations with large, established, long-term expat communities, not just digital nomad hubs, but places where people have actually put down roots. Places like Cuenca in Ecuador and Chiang Mai in Thailand are consistently cited not because of cheap prices, though that helps, but because there are real, stable communities there. Churches, clubs, hobby groups, volunteer organizations, language exchange programs. Infrastructure for belonging. Plan your social life as carefully as your financial life. Because no amount of savings protects you from what it feels like to be genuinely alone in a foreign country. Number 10. Most people never plan their exit strategy. And here we are, the last lesson. The one that sounds pessimistic on the surface, but is actually, I'd argue, the most optimistic thing in this entire video. Because planning for what could go wrong is what frees you to fully commit to what could go right. Most people who retire abroad plan the entry obsessively. They research countries and visas and cost of living for years. They have detailed spreadsheets. They know exactly how they're going to move their stuff, rent their first apartment, set up their banking. They've thought about healthcare and language and community. They've planned the move brilliantly. And then they've thought about zero about what happens if they need to come back. Not if they want to come back, if they need to. Because here's the reality. Life abroad doesn't exist in a vacuum. Health deteriorates, political situations shift, financial circumstances change. Countries that felt stable can become turbulent. A personal crisis, yours or a family member's, can require your presence back in the United States not for a week, but for months, or permanently. And the retirees who sold everything, the house, the furniture, the car, all of it, who have no US address, no American financial infrastructure left, no local support network, who depend entirely on Social Security with no savings cushion, these are the people for whom a forced return is genuinely catastrophic. Because re-entry into the American housing market, American healthcare costs, American daily expenses, after years abroad, is a brutal financial shock. And trying to do it without savings, without a network, without a legal address to establish yourself from, is one of the hardest financial situations a retiree can face. The exit strategy isn't about failure, it's about freedom. If you have a real backup plan, you can retire abroad with confidence rather than anxiety. You can commit fully to the life you're building, because you know that if you ever need to pivot, you can. What does a good exit strategy look like? It looks different for everyone, but the principles are consistent. Maintain some kind of US safety net, a savings account, an emergency fund denominated in dollars. Keep your US banking and credit infrastructure intact. Maintain a legal US mailing address through a mail forwarding service. Set up a legal power of attorney with someone you trust back home, so that if you're incapacitated abroad, someone can legally act on your behalf in the United States. And don't liquidate every single US asset just because you can. A small cushion can mean the difference between a manageable transition and a financial catastrophe. Think of it this way. An emergency exit on an airplane doesn't mean the pilot thinks the plane is going to crash. It means they've prepared for every possibility, which is exactly what makes flying safe. Plan the exit. Then go live the life. So here's the truth about retiring abroad in 2026. The dream is real. The cheap apartments, the better weather, the slower pace, the adventure of building a life somewhere completely new, all of it is real and attainable. Thousands of Americans are living it right now, every single day, and loving it. But the dream only works when you go in with open eyes, when you plan for the healthcare, the visa reality, the banking backup, the tax obligations, the loneliness, the family emergencies, and yes, the exit strategy. When you stop chasing the cheapest country and start building the right life. The people who succeed abroad long term aren't the most optimistic ones. They're the most prepared ones. And if you want to know exactly which countries offer the most stable visa paths, realistic costs in 2026, English access, and strong expat communities, the places where Americans are actually thriving right now, that's exactly what the next video covers. Watch it before you make any moves, because the information you use to make this decision matters more than almost any other decision you'll make in retirement.